Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on living in the antitypical day of atonement. We are in the 10th session, but it would only be my 9th presentation. So if you see a discrepancy there, you'll understand it is the 10th session, but my 9th presentation. So we are dealing with the subject of the living in the antitypical day of atonement. And this afternoon, we continue to look at what we call the 2300-day prophecy to establish the time for the investigative judgment, the cleansing of the sanctuary, and therefore the time for the antitypical day of atonement. We want to know exactly when this time began, and therefore we'll be in a position to understand what it entails for us living in these last days. So welcome, living in the antitypical day of atonement. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for the blessings of the day so far. We thank you for the ministry of your word to this point. And now as we enter into this topic for the afternoon, living in the antitypical day of atonement, we ask for your presence, your guidance, as we seek to unravel the 2300-day prophecy step by step, order by order. We pray now for your presence and your guidance. The angel whom you sent to guide Daniel, we pray for his presence now as we enter into this study in Jesus' name. Amen. So I'm going to share my screen and then begin. So living in the antitypical day of atonement, part 9. Yeah, there we are. Good. Living in the antitypical day of atonement, part 9. And we are talking about moving from the holy place to the most holy, and that is in heaven. Now, in AD 31, Christ entered the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to begin his work as our high priest, who ever lives to make intercession for us. And he does this by pleading his blood in our behalf and presenting our prayers mingled with his righteousness. And at this point, I would pause and ask a question, excuse me, as part of my process of trying to involve you in the discussion and in the presentation. So if we did not, so this is a question I'm going to ask, and I would want your feedback. If there was no statement either in the Bible or the Spirit of prophecy stating clearly that Christ pleads his blood in our behalf and mingles our prayers with his righteousness, if there was no statement directly in the Bible to that effect, or in the Spirit of prophecy to that effect, would we still be able to ascertain from the services of the ancient Jewish sanctuary that such things occur in heaven? Is there anything, or was there anything, or were there any aspects of the services of the ancient sanctuary that could teach us about Jesus pleading his blood on our behalf and mingling our prayers with his righteousness? Anyone? Sister Lilith?
Of incense and fire.
Pardon me?
The altar of incense and fire.
Explain more carefully. I don't want these kind of cryptic answers. Explain. Give us some explanation.
So the priest would be burning incense on the altar. And this altar is just outside of the inner, the Holy of Holies. It's at the entrance to it before the curtain. And so we could see that the incense is, well, before the incense, there would have been the sacrifices. But the sacrifice in the outer court would have already represented the predicted, if you like, shedding of the blood of the Lamb. And then the incense on the altar being burnt continually is going up again as an offering of prayer by the priest.
Okay. So you're mentioning here that on the altar of burnt sacrifice in the yard, there was a continual fire. You're mentioning that? A perpetual fire?
Yes, and on the altar of incense as well.
And on the altar of incense in the holy place, there was also a perpetual fire. What did these two perpetual fires represent to the people of Israel, and therefore having significance for us today?
Intercession. Perpetual intercession.
Okay. Yeah.
Perpetual intercession and perpetual atonement.
Okay, perpetual intercession and perpetual atonement. Which one represented the perpetual intercession and which one represented the perpetual atonement?
The incense was the perpetual intercession.
Yeah.
The shedding of blood was the perpetual atonement.
We're talking about two fires. The fire on the fire in the holy place on the altar of incense represented the perpetual intercession.
Fire in the outer court.
Yeah. Represented
perpetual atonement.
Perpetual atonement. Good. So those 2 points, I'm thankful to you for having established. Now, what activities by the priests in the holy place represented the pleading of Jesus's blood and the mingling of his prayers with our, the mingling of his righteousness with our prayers? Because what we're talking about now, you mentioned the perpetual fires that were burning. What I want now is an activity or activities of the priest that represent, because these activities of the priest represent the activities of Christ, our high priest. And therefore I want activities of the priest now.
And he went in and he sprinkled the holy place with the blood.
Yeah. Sprinkling of blood in the holy place represents what?
Well, that is the cleansing of the cleansing and atonement.
Okay, let me repeat then the questions or the points that I want you to address. There is in heaven with Christ as our high priest, he is pleading his blood. And he did that in the holy place for 1800 years. For 1800 years in the holy place, He pleaded his blood. He presented his blood before the Father. What activity of the priest in the holy place represented that? Christ pleading his blood. What activity of the priest in the holy place represented Christ pleading his blood? You there, Sister Lida?
Yes, I'm there.
Uh-huh. So, okay, the answer you gave me, you mentioned for the, yeah, go ahead.
So you go ahead. Which activity represented the pleading of his blood?
Yeah. Not the cleansing of the sanctuary. Okay, so you did mention it, but you gave it the wrong application.
Yeah.
Yeah, daily, the priest sprinkled the blood of the sacrifices in the holy place against the before the most holy place. But he was in the holy place and he sprinkled it in the holy place. And that represented the blood of Christ being presented for sin and atonement for sin. This is not about the cleansing of the sanctuary yet. This is about the daily presentation of the blood, bringing the sins into the sanctuary, but representing Christ pleading his blood before the Father. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it now that the priest did that represented Christ mingling his righteousness with our prayers?
That would have been the incense.
What about the incense?
Offering up the incense.
The priest offered up the incense. That's right. He offered the incense. He put the incense. And what instrument did he use to offer up the incense?
He had a golden censer.
A censer, that's right. He had a censer with which he offered up the incense. He put the incense and the fire and so on in his censer and offered up the incense as he offered up the incense daily during the daily service. And this represented what again? This was a symbol of what? A teaching model for what?
The mingling of his sacrifice for us with prayer.
The mingling, Christ mingling his righteousness with our prayers. So when we offer up our prayers, the incense represents the righteousness of Christ. Christ, the priest now, Christ is now the priest, and he offers up his righteousness. He mingles his righteousness with our prayers and make them then, whatever our prayers are, however our prayers are, sometimes they are not the most, let's say, coherent or whatever, but once they come from the heart, Christ mingles his righteousness with those prayers and make them acceptable to God. Thank you, sister. Yeah, go ahead.
About the fire, because in the Old Testament, God accepted sacrifices with his fire would swallow up the sacrifices that were done in a way that was pleasing to him. And I'm wondering, the fire, perpetual fire on both altars, if that was a symbol of that kind of past activity. The fire representing that his acceptance.
Okay. All right. Well, come back with those questions later. Okay. Sort out your questions and come back with them later. I thank you then for your intercession, your intervention, and your answering my questions. Not that I don't want to answer your questions, but I will see if we can answer those questions later. And then any other questions that come, we will seek to address them later. So thank you, Sister Lilith. And this is what I want from our people, that not only to listen to presentations, but be able to reproduce in your own words and in a coherent manner, and you will get help in sorting your thoughts out. This is what we are here for, to help you to sort your thoughts out. But you first need to be able to make the attempt, have the courage, by the grace of God, to make the attempt. And once you make that attempt, you will get help sorting your thoughts out. If you abstain, if you hold back, if you refrain, afraid to be wrong, afraid of what people might think of you, afraid of what people might say, then you will never make that step towards expressing yourself and getting help in doing so, and therefore being able to sort out your words and sort out your thoughts and get the particular concept riveted properly in your mind, to the extent that one day, eventually, soon, you will be able to present this to others and make it clear. So in AD 31, then Christ entered the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to begin his work as our high priest, whoever lives to make intercession for us. And Sister Lilith made mention of the altar, the perpetual fire on the altar of incense, which made that clear, that we have a high priest, whoever lives to make intercession for us, perpetual intercession. And he does this by pleading his blood on our behalf and presenting our prayers mingled with his righteousness. And these things can be seen not only from direct statements in the Bible or the spirit of prophecy, but by examining the services of the ancient Jewish sanctuary. And we said that that sanctuary, the priesthood of that sanctuary and the services of that sanctuary are teaching models for us about the heavenly sanctuary, the priesthood of the heavenly sanctuary, and the services of the heavenly sanctuary. In the book of Revelation, we saw both Christ and the Father in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary, Revelation 1, 9-18, and Revelation 4, 1-11. And you can see that, you can understand it better by going back to our presentations, then the last two presentations on this subject, where we explained what we saw there. We saw it and we explained it, and we said that what anybody to help us? Okay, this question for you as well. What was the evidence by which we established that we saw, in fact, Christ in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary? What did we see? Where did we, what environment did we see Christ? We saw Christ in Revelation 1. We saw Christ in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. What was the environment? What aspects of the sanctuary did we see there to show that Christ was in the holy place? Somebody?
John saw the altar and the commandments and Aaron rod that budded. He saw in vision.
That would be, if anything, that would be the most holy place. But I want to know, what did he see in Revelation 1 to show that Christ was in fact in the holy place, not the most holy place. And we're dealing here with Revelation 1. I thank you for attempting, but I want you to get it right now, or somebody else. Revelation 1, I believe I give anybody a minute to look at it. Revelation 1, what did the Apostle John see in the holy place to show that Christ was there in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary?
The seven candlesticks.
Yes, he saw Christ in the midst of the seven candlesticks. And in terms of the Father, what did he see? Revelation 4. All right, check it and come back. Revelation 4. In Daniel 7, we saw both the Father and the Son move, obviously, to the most holy place for the investigative judgment and the cleansing of the sanctuary. And we are going now to read that again to set forward our study for this evening. Daniel 7, 9 to 10. First of all, having established that we saw both the Father and the Son in the holy place, we now establish that both moved from the holy place and therefore to the most holy place. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So those thrones were cast down. Doesn't mean that they were thrown down or cast down from somewhere to the next. They were set down. That's what it means. They were placed, they were put in place, they were set in place, they were ordered. And because they had been moved from one place to another, they were established in a particular position. They were placed there, they were set down, they were positioned. These thrones, and then having seen the thrones being set in place, he saw the Ancient of Days sit on the thrones. So the thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days came and sat on the thrones, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. So there's one person here we see move and sit down. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. So we see the Father moving and sitting down to judgment. And now the Son. Daniel 7, 13 and 14. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man. And when we see that one like the Son of Man, as we saw in Daniel 3 with the fiery furnace, it is really the Son of Man, came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. So we saw the Ancient of Days, the Father, and now we see the Son, a separate person, showing that in fact they are separate persons. They are not one person. They are separate persons. The Father, now the Son, and the Son was brought to the Father, the Ancient of Days. They brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and the kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So what we are seeing here is that the judgment was set and the books were open, and the Ancient of Days sat in judgment. And now the Son comes to the judgment before the Ancient of Days, and out of this judgment, as a result of this judgment, the Son is given a kingdom and dominion and glory, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So the judgment is set, the books are open, the Father sits in judgment, the Son comes to the judgment, and as a result of this judgment, the Son is given a kingdom, etc., showing that the judgment proves the Son to be worthy of receiving the kingdom and the dominion, etc. And we read elsewhere in Daniel 7 that the saints are also given the kingdom with the Son, showing that the judgment also shows that the saints are worthy to receive the kingdom with the Son.
Brother Newton,
Yeah.
could I just ask a quick question? Because
Yes, and we will have to deal with it at the end, but ask it.
there could be a lot of questions asked here, because based on what you're saying is that the judgment justifies the Son receiving the kingdom. But I'm asking the question, would it not have been justified by the fact that after Jesus' return to heaven, dying on the cross, and he was given the right to open the scroll, that gave him the right to receive the kingdom and not so much the judgment? That would be my question now. And I have another 2 or 3 questions in line with what you're saying, but let me just pause there.
Yes, you are is a blitzkrieg, Brother Wayne. Yes, what I would say quickly then, and we'll come back to it hopefully later. What I would say quickly is that everything that Christ did gave him the right. What the judgment does is make it clear to everybody, and therefore that's why I'm saying the judgment. It is, you see, it is in the judgment that God had to have this judgment, this investigative judgment, in order to demonstrate to the universe, the unfallen worlds, people on earth, the wicked angels, everybody. He had to have this judgment in order to demonstrate everything, because everything might not have been clearly seen, etc., etc., etc. So the judgment makes everything clear. And therefore, in fact, Christ could not really receive the kingdom, nor could the saints receive the kingdom in all fairness and jurisprudential honesty, if I should say that, until the judgment made it clear that they were worthy, they were justified. And even God is justified in this judgment. Okay. So we've established then that the Father and the Son moved. We are now seeking to establish the time of their moving from the first apartment to the second, so as to establish the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary and the time for the beginning of the antitypical day of atonement. So we're looking at the time of the moving. For this purpose, we show that the cleansing of the sanctuary involves a judgment, so that in finding the time for this judgment, known in Adventist circles as the investigative judgment, we shall find the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary. And we read from Great Controversy pages 421 to 22. And we saw that on the typical Day of Atonement, when the priest was cleansing the sanctuary, because it is from that Day of Atonement, cleansing of the sanctuary, that we understand the heavenly Day of Atonement, cleansing of the sanctuary. And when the priest on the Day of Atonement cleansed the sanctuary, the people were to afflict their souls and cleanse and purify their hearts from sin. And those who failed to do so were to be cut off. And therefore that shows that there was a type of investigation, a type of judgment occurred on that day, a separation, so to speak, which is a model for us understanding then a judgment taking place on the antitypical Day of Atonement with regard to the heavenly sanctuary. But Sister White also says, and Adventists use certain texts to show that when Christ comes, he comes to give reward, and therefore there must be some examination of the books to show who is worthy to receive these rewards. So there's a judgment with the sanctuary. So when we see this judgment, we know that we are talking about the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary and the time of the antitypical Day of Atonement. The time of the judgment is the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary. We've also established that it is in Daniel 8 that we find the text which indicates the time when Jesus moved to the most holy place for the cleansing of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment, and therefore the time that began the antitypical day of atonement. Daniel 8:13 and 14. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And what we are going to see, in fact, is that the time that is given, the time period that is given, represents a starting point, a particular starting point in relation to the earthly sanctuary, and ends with an ending point, which is also a starting point in relation to the heavenly sanctuary. We shall see that eventually as we move on. But in answer to a question, then, the time is given unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. We shall see what was the upshot of that statement. But we've also established that these 2,300 days, which were presented as 2,300 evening mornings in Daniel 8:14, are in actuality 2,300 full days rather than half days. Some expositors try to make them 2,300 half days rather than 2,300 full days. 2,300 half days would give you only 1,150 full days. But we used an interpretive key to establish that these were 2,300 full days. Does anyone want to tell us what that interpretive key was? How do we know that these 2,300 days, these 2,300 evening mornings or evenings and mornings were in fact 2,300 full days? Anybody wants to give us the means, tell us the means by which we interpreted this point and we understood it to represent 2,300 full days, evening, mornings, or evenings and mornings? Anyone?
Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 6:4. Let me find them for you. 1 second.
Well, check it out, but that is not that is part of the story. Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6. But that does not prove that we are dealing with 2,300 full days. I want the interpretive.
Genesis, the evening and the morning was the first, second, third day. In Genesis, we find that they were
Genesis,
evening.
which chapter of that? Genesis, Christine?
Genesis 1, and I think part of 2, but 1 definitely.
Yes, and I'm glad that you are teaching your younger sister. Thank you. I get the impression that you used to have to correct her quite a bit in the old days. Don't comment. Yes, yes, Vashti, it is Genesis. You can hold those texts that you have and give me the meaning of them later on. But yes, it is Genesis 1 where we read the evenings and the evening and the morning were the first day, the evening and the morning were the second day, etc., 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 showing that the term evening and morning, or evening mornings, or evenings and mornings, has to do with the days, and they mean full days. The evening and the morning were the first day, the evening and the morning were the second day. All right, Vashti? Got that clear now? Okay. Pardon?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. No problem at all. Okay, so these were actually 2,300 full days. There are also 2,300 symbolic days. And in symbolic prophecy, a day represents a year. See Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6. So your text now, Vashti, Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6 give us the understanding that in symbolic prophecy, a day represents a year, Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6. So Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6 tell us that the 2300 days are therefore 2300 calendar years, at the end of which the sanctuary would be cleansed. 2300 calendar years, 2300 days representing 2300 calendar years. Now, in discussing it with me during the week, Sister Flo said that she remembers, in fact, that a presentation or some presentations by Brother Jude, her brother, and probably others as well, which indicated that we are really dealing with 2300 sanctuary cleansing days. Does anybody remember that? Does anybody have anything on that? I'm certainly going to check it out carefully, but can anybody intervene on that point at this particular point in time? The suggestion, the thought that these 2300 days were in fact 2300 sanctuary cleansing days, and that sanctuary cleansing occurred once a year. So we are in fact dealing with 2300 calendar years. Anybody?
I could see the point being made, because when you consider that it is the cleansing of the sanctuary, and the first 490 days of the 2300 was supposed to have brought in everlasting righteousness by the Israelites. And then moving on from there, when they did not, the other 1810 were supposed to make sure that the maturity of Christian character would have reached its appropriate maturity, so that Jesus could have come at 1844. Then I can see the reasoning behind the whole idea of the 2300 days being 2300 sanctuary cleansing days.
Okay.
And
so
also add to that, brother Ozzy, it
yes,
says the word came to Daniel that they must get rid of sin and bring in everlasting righteousness. And that is what the sanctuary was about, cleansing the sin from the people and bringing in righteousness. The heavenly sanctuary continue in the same way. And that is why it's perpetual. It's cleansing God's people from sin and bringing in the righteousness of Christ.
thank you, Sister Christine. Very interesting thought there. Very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So we are dealing now. Hello?
Yeah, I just want to mention a response to your question. Based on your question, in the Hebrew, in Daniel 8:14, we have Ad, Ereb, Boker, Nisdag, Kodesh. And the Nasdag is an adjectival clause that describes days. So it is unto 2,300 sanctuary cleansings or days of atonements. Therefore, it would, since your birthday comes once a year and the Day of Atonement came once a year, it is 2,300 of your birthdays, which would be 2,300 sanctuary cleansing days. Therefore, it would have to be sanctuary 2,300 sanctuary cleansings, or 2,300 years.
Calendar years.
But yeah, Bible prophecy.
Yeah, all right, thank you, thank you. Obviously, a lot of stuff there that we need to check out and help to establish this thing on solid footing. Yes, Sister Lilith?
I got bumped out there. I've just put myself back on the iPad.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome back. All right. Thank you, brother Saul, Sister Christine, brother Wayne. Yeah. All right. So these are 2300 days, therefore 2300 calendar years, at the end of which the sanctuary would be cleansed. We therefore need to find the end of these 2300 years in order to discover the time for the cleansing of the sanctuary and the beginning of the antitypical Day of Atonement. And in order to find the end of these days, we must first find the beginning, of course. How shall we find the beginning of the 2300 years? We will need to visit Daniel 9. But why? Taking it step by step. So we've established certain things.
9:24. Daniel 9:24.
Daniel 9:24. Yes, we are going to get there step by step. And so we've established that it is in Daniel 8:14 that we find the beginning. We find the text which shows us the length of time to elapse before the cleansing of the sanctuary. We've established that Daniel 8:14 talked about 2300 days. We've discovered that there are actually 2300 full days, 2300 symbolic days, and also, in fact, that a day in prophecy, in symbolic prophecy, is equal to a year, and that these were 2300 years, and in fact, 2300 sanctuary cleansings, therefore 2300 calendar years. Now, and we need now to find the beginning, and we have to visit Daniel 9. The question is why. So we move now from Daniel 8 to Daniel 9, and we follow some steps. A common feature of Daniel 2, 7, and 8, Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Daniel chapter 8, is that the prophet is first presented with a number of symbols, after which explanations are given, and we can trace that in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8. In Daniel 2 is portrayed a multi-metalled image, after which an explanation is given. Daniel 2, when Nebuchadnezzar saw the vision, his wise men could not tell him the vision, far less interpret it. But Daniel came, and by the grace of God, Daniel told him what the vision was. That the king could not even remember the vision he saw, and God gave him that memory through Daniel, and then gave him an explanation for it. Daniel chapter 2. You are invited to go back and read it for yourself and establish this principle. In Daniel 7 are portrayed 4 beasts, followed by a little horn and a judgment, after which an explanation is given. You can go back, read Daniel 7, see the point up to which the symbols are presented, see the transition point when it is said that an explanation will be given, and then see the explanation, Daniel chapter 7. Also, in Daniel 8, where we find the prophecy of the 2300 days, in Daniel 8 also some animals are presented, followed by a little horn and the cleansing of the sanctuary, after which we read the following. So this helps us to establish the fact that there are, these prophecies are divided into sections. First of all, a presentation of symbols, followed by a bridge, where it is said that we are going to give you the explanation, followed by the explanation. Symbols, bridge, explanation. So we have more or less talked about the symbols in Daniel 8, now the bridge, and leading to the explanation. Daniel 8, 15 to 19. And it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for a meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, this is a river, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So this man could not have been an angel, because Gabriel was the highest of the angels, and therefore this man had to be, in fact, Christ. And he said to Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. And notice here, if he's between the banks of the Ulai, of the river, which means he's actually on the river. So we see him here on the river in Daniel 8, and then we see him on the river again in Daniel 10 and 11, and in Revelation 10, we see him with one foot on the river, one foot on the water, and another foot on the land. Some significant things which it is worth our time to investigate, you know, such wonderful stuff to read and study and investigate in the Bible. I don't know how people talk about being bored, but that's another story for another time. So this man, who obviously is Christ, tells Gabriel, make Daniel to understand the vision. So there's the bridge. There's the bridge where he has seen the vision, and now there comes a time when he must understand, and this need for understanding is being here established. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Here we are introduced to a particular time called the time of the end. And obviously, as students of prophecy in relation to various prophecies, we need to understand when that time is, the time of the end. So Daniel is told by the prophet, by the angel, sorry, he fell on his face afraid, but the angel said, understand. You need to understand, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And in connection with that, as we were reading in the Bible year this morning, we read of a significant factor involved in prophets receiving visions. We were reading about Balaam, who was a prophet, and twice he said he was in a trance with his eye opened. And that is a significant identification point, significant factor in the identification of a prophet, of a true prophet. And it was a factor that was used in the days of Sister White to determine whether she was in fact a true prophet, in a trance with eyes open. And that's in Numbers. We read it twice this morning in relation to Balaam, the prophet, in a trance with the eye open. So here we see Daniel said that he was in a deep sleep on his face, with his face toward the ground, but the angel touched him and set him upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed, the end shall be. So that is the bridge where after the vision was given with the simple symbols, the angel comes now to explain the vision, and he tells Daniel, I will explain the vision to you. So the angel began to provide the explanation, but soon we read something else. Something happened that prevented the angel from being able to deliver the explanation as he wanted to. Let's read Daniel 8, 26 and 27. The angel is speaking here, and he says, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told thee, that is the vision of the 2300 days, 2300 evening mornings, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. So he's telling Daniel, it is a true vision. Daniel will have cause to be perplexed about this vision. The angel is saying, it is a true vision. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Many days, that's a long time, he's saying. Good. So Daniel now begins to get perplexed. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward, I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. It was a vision. The angel said it was true, but it was a vision that caused trouble. What was the problem? The angel could not, first of all, we read here that the angel could not complete his explanation because Daniel fainted. So it made no sense continue talking because Daniel fainted. The question is, why did Daniel faint? It was because of the apparently long time period, 2,300 years before the sanctuary would be cleansed. So Daniel understood that they were talking about 2,300 years. And he was astonished. He was really perplexed. Daniel had previously understood that the length of the Jewish captivity and therefore the desolation of the Jewish sanctuary would be for 70 years. And we can see that in Jeremiah 25, 11, 12, and Jeremiah 29, 10. We're going to read from Jeremiah 29, and we're going to read from verses 10 to 14 to see a prophecy that Daniel would have had previously from Jeremiah, because when they went into captivity, Daniel went into captivity under Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And at that time, they would have had the prophecies, already would have had the prophecies of Jeremiah. So we're going to look now at a prophecy of Jeremiah showing that the captivity was in fact prophesied to be of 70 years duration. We're going to read Jeremiah 29, 10 to 14. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you 70 years and perform my good word toward you and cause you to return to this place. So the captivity would be 70 years, and after 70 years, they would return. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. And I will be found of you, saith the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord, and I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive. So 70 years were to elapse in the captivity, and notice the conditionality involved. At the end of the 70 years, they would be delivered, but on the condition that they went and prayed to the Lord. They would only be delivered from captivity if they understood what was going on and set themselves to pray and to seek the Lord. And he said, I will be found of you if you seek me with all your heart, and I will be heard of you, I'll be found of you, and I will turn away your captivity at the end of 70 years. So essentially then, Daniel had understood, he had come to Babylon with the understanding that the captivity would have been 70 years. However, Daniel was now astonished when he saw the prophecy of the 2,300 years, thinking that it meant a long extension of the captivity and the desolation of the Jewish sanctuary. That is why he fainted. He was thinking, wait a minute, you mean things are so bad that instead of 70 years, the captivity and the desolation of the sanctuary would now be 2,300 years? That was too much for Daniel. He fainted, and the angel had to break off the explanation. In time, however, Daniel confirmed that the captivity would in fact be 70 years as he originally understood. And we find that in Daniel 9, and that is how we come to Daniel chapter 9. And we're going to read verses 1 and 2. Daniel speaking. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldees. This is Darius the Mede, the first of the Medo-Persian kings to rule over Babylon. Darius the Mede, he in fact was a Median.
Brother Newton,
And in
you
the
have
first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the Lord came to Jeremiah, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So when the angel presented the prophecy of the 2300 years, Daniel fainted, got up later, went and did the king's business. But obviously, as time went by, he set himself once again to study this. This is so important, because sometimes you have what seems to be the word of the Lord as opposed to the word of the Lord. And this is the experience that was had by those who had the disappointment in 1844, where they also went back and studied the word of the Lord and understood what the word of the Lord had for them. So Daniel, a prophet in his own right, one of the greatest of the prophets, yet he had to confirm the word of the Lord by studying the writings of another prophet, a prophet contemporary but previous to him, the prophet Jeremiah. And having spent some time in dismay and disbelief, and obviously with some prayer and fasting as well, he said, well, so where didn't we understand that the captivity would be 70 years? And where did we get that information? Jeremiah the prophet. So I'm going back to study Jeremiah. There are times when we need to go back and study. And he went back and studied Jeremiah, and he settled it in his mind. The captivity was to be 70 years. So that 2300 years had to be something else. And but obviously, if you know Daniel, you know that he also wanted to find out what it was all about. So anyhow, his mind is now clear that the captivity and therefore the desolation of the Jewish sanctuary would be, in fact, 70 years. The 2300 days will be something else. And therefore, Daniel set himself now to prayer and fasting. And soon we are told the angel came to give him the explanation, to complete the explanation which had been begun some years prior in Daniel chapter 8. There is why 2300 years is the number significant in the same way of the fact for 90 years cut off for the Jews from the prophecy of the same 2300 years was significant. Daniel 8:13, both the sanctuary and the host, are they the same, or what? Or who is the host? Okay. All right. Well,
Brother Newton.
Some questions there. All right. Yes, Vashti.
Check your that text. You have Jeremiah, but I think you were quoting from Daniel. What are you? Yeah, you have Jeremiah 9. Isn't it Daniel?
Sorry. This. Thank you, Sister Vashti. Let me change it. Thank you. Yes, very observant. Okay, so we go there now. Daniel 9, 1 and 2. So Daniel set himself to pray, and we see that then in Daniel chapter 9, after he had done the study and was confirmed in the conclusion that the captivity would be 70 years and the desolation therefore the sanctuary Jewish sanctuary will be 70 years. He he set himself to prayer and fasting. And that prayer of Daniel is recorded then in verses 3 to 19, is a prayer worth reading, worth meditating upon, because it has some important lessons for us. And Daniel 9:20 to 27, and whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, whilst I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And I know that Dr. Duglin likes to comment on the swiftness of Gabriel's prayer, because what is obviously meant here is that Daniel began prayer in the morning. I don't know if he began at the time of the morning oblation, which I have concluded is 9 o'clock. But between, let's say, whatever time he began, it was in the morning, and Gabriel arrived at the time of the evening oblation, which was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That had to be some speed. The Bible is careful to note he was caused to fly swiftly. And he came and touched Daniel about the time of the evening oblation, and he informed me and talked with me and said, "Oh, Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding." So he's come back to help Daniel understand the vision. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. And we end there for today. We will pick it up at another time. But we see there then that what happened, how Daniel fainted. The angel could not give the explanation, but then Daniel went back, he studied, he was confirmed in his understanding that the captivity would be 70 years. And then he set himself to prayer and fasting. And while he was praying and fasting, angel Gabriel came, whom he had seen before in the vision at the beginning. Notice that he came and said, "Daniel, I'm now come to give you skill and understanding. Therefore, consider the matter, understand the matter, and consider the vision." And I close with this thought. That same angel Gabriel is able also today to give us skill and understanding and enable us to understand the matter and be able to gain understanding of the prophecies, whoever we are. Notice what Daniel did. He prayed and he studied and he prayed again, and the angel came. Well, we might not see the angel in a vision, but I can assure you that same angel or some other angel will be sent by God if you are serious enough and really want to understand. No matter how you think, well, your head is hard or you getting old or you can't understand. The same God that made it clear to Daniel will make it clear to you as you pray and as you set yourself to study. He will send his angel to give you skill and understanding. I'm now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. All right. Time gone. Time is up. I will just take one or two questions. Now, Wayne, I think I would have given you an answer that Christ would have qualified in various ways for the kingdom, but everything according to God's way of doing things, everything has to go through the judgment. Everything must come through the judgment. Everything must be made clear in the judgment. So that is why the scripture says that through the judgment and as a result of the judgment and coming out of the judgment, Christ and the saints are given the kingdom. A question is asked, what is meant by the host because it said that how long will the host be given to trample underfoot. The host, well, first of all, the host was a name for the people of Israel or the armies of Israel. But now the word host, Christ is called the captain of the Lord's host, the captain of the Lord's army, the Lord's angels. So essentially what we're talking about here, let me put it in capsule and probably come back to it later. What we're talking about really is not just the cleansing of the earth, the trampling on the foot of the earthly sanctuary by the Babylonians and the Jewish captors, but also the trampling on the foot of the heavenly sanctuary by the papal beast, the papal little horn, who trampled the heavenly sanctuary and therefore the ministering angels. And when I said trample them on the foot, he so enshrouded the world in darkness and set up his own false priesthood, that the heavenly sanctuary and the heavenly priesthood and the angels involved were obscured from the sight of men, trampled on the foot, so to speak, because of the domineering practices and the false doctrines of the papacy, who is represented as a little horn in Daniel 7 and also in Daniel 8. That host has to do with the sanctuary and the ministry and the angels that were hidden from our sight, the ministration of the holy angels that was hidden from our sight through the obscuring work of the little horn of Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. Well, it seems to me that I am going to have to make more time for questions because as you can see, my time is gone, and the time
So, Brother
for
Newton, could you just consider this one as you close off?
yes, Brother Wayne, I am trying to find a way out, but yeah, go ahead.
Is there a dual application to Daniel 7, 13, and 14? You don't have to answer it, no.
You mean as relates to Christ coming?
As it relates to Christ's coming, yes.
Coming before the Ancient of Days.
Right, right.
Yeah, I know that you had raised a question on that last time. All right. So I'll consider it then. I'll give it some consideration. My first reaction is no, but I think I should give everything due consideration. All right. Any other question, even if I have to defer the answer? Any other question? Anybody? Okay, I'll leave.
About the fire.
The fire, yes, Sister Lilith.
Because this fire, I'm wondering if it's like the same fire that God accepted sacrifices by his fire coming down and not eating them up, but burning them up. And this angel, it's the angel of the altar and fire. He fills the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, Revelation 8. And then in Revelation 14, and another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire. I just want to make some connection with this fire.
Yeah, okay, so you had fire.
Revelation.
Yeah, you had fire in the earthly sanctuary, and now you see fire in the heavenly sanctuary. One represented the other, and it is evidence then that what happened in the earthly taught us about what happened in the heavenly. I will. The fire that came out and burnt up the sons of Aaron. Well, That's
No,
before
that
that.
was when they did something wrong, but when God was pleased with whatever sacrifice was made, his fire came and accepted.
Yeah, so so that's a consuming fire. When the
Yeah.
Lord accepts, it burns the sacrifice. When the Lord rejects or gives up,
When the angel throws down the fire, that's it.
well, that signifies
Is it?
something serious, a termination or
Yeah.
a serious event. Yes.
Yes.
All right. We
Okay.
can pursue that further as well.
And
Okay.
since you were just, and Brother Newton,
Yeah.
like I said, I had many more questions, right? So
Yeah.
is the chronological order sequential in verses 9 through 14 of Daniel 7? That would be another question.
Yeah. I would say yes, but I can't entertain any discussion now. All right. Thanks.
No. And then
yeah.
finally, is the beginning of the judgment and the cleansing of the sanctuary at the same time period? That's
Again,
another question.
yes, and again, my first answer will be yes, but obviously you want to discuss it further. All right, I'm going to finish here. I'm handing over to Brother Saul and Sister Angela for the Thanksgiving praise and exhortation session, and they at the end of that we will have the closing prayer. They will indicate prayer or prayers by whom I finish here. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your contributions. May God continue to richly bless you, Brother Saul. And